Okay guys, so in this video I'm going to explain how rent to rent is easy when you know what you're doing. Now just for context, my name's Luke. Over the last 8 years I've built a 6-figure rent to rent business. I started with around £6,000 in savings. I've also taught hundreds of people how to do the same. So by the end of this video you're going to know exactly how to start your own rent to rent business today, and you're going to know how to get to £10,000 a month in profit. So if that sounds interesting, make sure you watch till the end. So first I want to talk to you about a framework that we use inside our business, and it's also a framework that we teach to our clients, and it's called the LAPS framework. LAPS stands for leads, appointments, presentations and sales. So the first part of the LAPS framework is L for leads, and this is the start of your funnel, right? So this is where rent to rent deals actually come from. Rent to rent isn't about luck, it's about outreach and volume. Rent to rent deals come from landlords who want certainty, less hassle and long-term solutions. So you don't need the perfect lead source, you need consistency. Now my main lead sources are Gumtree, Facebook Marketplace and OpenRent. Now here you can see on Gumtree there's over 1,000 adverts from landlords marketing their properties. All you have to do is start messaging these landlords. Now here you can see on Facebook, same thing, hundreds and hundreds of properties up for rent direct to landlord. All you have to do is message as many of these landlords as you can. Now we've got OpenRent, thousands and thousands of properties, all being marketed by landlords for rent. All you have to do is message as many of these landlords as possible. Now, as well as using Gumtree, Facebook and OpenRent, we also use Rightmove, where we find deals that are being marketed through estate agents. Sometimes the estate agents are working on behalf of the landlord simply on a tenant find basis, which means that the landlord is paying them just to find a tenant, and then the landlord will work directly with the tenant rather than the agent sitting in the middle as the management company. So there's lots of agents online who are simply just trying to find a tenant, and that tenant could be you as a company. So don't sleep on agents. As well as using Gumtree, Facebook and OpenRent, look on Rightmove as well and message some estate agents. Clients of ours like Francis, Casey and Louise all secured rent to rent deals through estate agents last year. I also got my first rent to rent deal through an estate agent. So you can find deals through agents. The next way we get leads is direct mail to landlords. So we write letters to HMO landlords offering our services, and you can do the same. You can request the HMO register from your local council, and once you've got the addresses of the landlords, not the addresses of the properties themselves, but the landlord's home addresses, you can write them letters, and your letters should look something like this. So you need to use compelling copy, you need to mention all the pain points about landlording, and then you have to position your offer as a solution. And then you put your contact details at the bottom and you try and either get them onto a phone call or encourage them to email you. We send around 500 letters every quarter. My clients, Leon and Rebecca, sent 800 letters a couple months ago, and the following week they had 13 viewings booked with landlords. Make sure you're sending your letters, as well as using Gumtree, Facebook and OpenRent, and going on Rightmove and speaking to agents. The next way you can generate leads is paid ads. Now in your paid ads you want to target landlords' problems. Similar to the direct mail, we get really good responses from our paid ads at the moment. As you can see, these are all leads that came in last week. These are all landlords who've raised their hand to our ad and said they're interested in guaranteed rent. They've given me their contact number and their email address. So you can do this too. Once you have this information, your job is to then follow up, get them onto a phone call and try and arrange a viewing, which is the next step of the LAPS framework. So those are the main methods that we're using at the moment that are working for us. There's no single best source. The best source is the one you actually use. So if I was you, I would work my way through these. I would start with free organic platforms like Gumtree, Facebook and OpenRent. I'd make sure I'm sending messages consistently on these platforms. Then I'd start sending messages on Rightmove. Then I'd get my direct mail letters to landlords sent out so they're working for you in the background. And then I would get my paid ad strategy dialed in so they're also working for you in the background too. The real strategy is to run everything: cold outreach, warm outreach and paid ads, manual and automated, because this is a numbers game, not a talent contest. You should be using the rule of 100 here. You should send out 100 messages, 100 letters and run paid ads for 100 days. Last week alone I generated 8 landlord leads by running ads at around £35 per day for just 1 week, which you can see here. You don't need thousands of leads, you just need enough. Now the next step from leads is not to sell them straight away. You only generate leads so you can get to the next step, which is organizing a viewing or an appointment. Every step in this process has one job: leads create appointments. Now that moves us on to the next part of the LAPS framework, which is A for appointments. So now you've got your leads firing, you've got paid ads running, you've got direct to landlord letters working for you in the background, you're doing your online outreach. The next step is to get a viewing. So you have to turn these leads into viewings and appointments. So for 100 outreach attempts, you should aim for around 20 viewings, which is roughly a 20% conversion rate. At this stage, you are not negotiating, you are not offering a price, you're simply positioning yourself as a long-term solution. Your only objective here is to get the viewing. Now, once you get the viewing booked in, viewings are where the deals are actually won. Viewings are not a pitch, they are listening exercises, and you're looking for pain. So when you're on viewings with landlords, try not to talk too much, try and listen more than you speak. You need to ask provoking questions that will encourage the landlord to tell you about the property, tell you about the previous tenants. And when you ask these questions, you should be listening and waiting to hear one of these common landlord pain points. They may mention tenant arrears from previous tenants. They may mention nightmare previous tenants. They may mention ongoing maintenance. They may mention the stress and time drain of managing their own property. They may mention fear around the renters reform bill that's coming in May. They may speak about the loss of control as a landlord because of all the new tenant rights and rules that are coming into play with the renters reform bill. Many landlords feel like they're losing control. They feel like the tenants have more rights than them. And that's why many landlords are considering exiting the market, because they're scared. So when you're on these viewings, have a normal conversation with the landlord, and you should be listening to hear one of these pain points. Then when you do hear one of these pain points, you should dig a little deeper. You should ask questions like, how did that make you feel? And how did that affect you? What was the overall impact on you? What you're doing here is you're tapping into the psychology behind these pain points, and you're widening the gap between where they are now, between their previous experiences and their dream outcome of where they'd like to be in an ideal world. So once you dig a little deeper, you then let them talk and you listen. Now, once they're finished talking and you sense a gap where you can speak, this is where you subtly position yourself. You're not selling at this point, you're just positioning yourself subtly. You simply explain that your company is the opposite of those problems. So these problems that they've experienced, your company is the opposite. You're going to offer them a long-term rent. The rent you offer them will be a guaranteed rent. There'll be no tenant hassle if they choose to work with you, and there'll be no maintenance stress because you'll do the maintenance. To summarize to a landlord, basically tell them you'll do the donkey work and they get to sit back and get paid. Now, what you don't do at the viewing is you don't mention any figures, you don't make any offers, and you don't enter into any negotiation. You leave, you run the numbers, and you come back properly. Now we move on to P for presentations. So you've generated 100 leads, you've been on 20 viewings, you've gone through the process of looking for the pain points, you've dug a little deeper into the psychology, you've positioned yourself without selling, then you've gone back home to do the numbers. Now it's time to present your offer. Now we normally offer within 24 to 48 hours of the viewing. Now a strong offer needs to include a fixed rent amount, normally over a 1 to 3 year term. You can offer a small annual increase with a clear professional structure, and you can back it up with comparable properties. They must be like for like properties, and they must be within a quarter mile of the property you're offering on. Keep your offer short, clear, and no waffle. Here's exactly how we make offers. We send them over email like this. We keep it short and precise. We have a guaranteed rent amount, the initial term, an extension option. We also sometimes include an annual increase. We cover the maintenance up to a certain percentage of the rent, and we ask for a 2-week grace period to prepare the property before we start. We also attach comparable properties so they can see like for like properties within a quarter mile of theirs that are priced similar to the amount we're offering, and we say we're happy to jump on the phone and discuss things further the next day. You want to use smart leverage, so make sure you ask for a 2-week grace period. And if you furnish and market the property quickly, you may even be able to do some viewings, and you may even be able to collect some rent before you have to pay, which reduces your initial startup cost. So that's how you present your offer. You do it over email, just like this, and you make sure you include these points here. Now we move on to the final part of the LAPS framework, which is S for sales. Now this is where you finalize the deal. So after you've sent your offer over email, the landlord will either say no, or they're going to ask to see a copy of the contract. Now what happens next is you send over the draft contract There may be some back and forth amendments made by the landlord and yourself. The goal here is to create full transparency. This is actually a trust building process, and sometimes the landlord may want to meet you again, either for a coffee or at the property for another viewing, where you can discuss things again face to face. This process can take a week or more, and that's normal. So get used to this process. It's not always straightforward. You don't just send a contract and then they sign it. Normally they'll want to make some amendments, or they may ask what a specific part of the contract means, and all you have to do is be transparent, be willing to work with them, and be willing to explain anything they're not sure of. Now here's an example of the contract you'll send. It will be a very straightforward company let agreement. You'll set the date for the agreement to start. You need the landlord name, address, email, phone, registration of the company if they have a company, and here will be your information as the company tenant, registration number, registration address, email, phone, and contact information. Then you'll have the property address and then the terms of the contract. You can find contracts like this on websites like Law Depot or Simply Docs. You need a very straightforward company let agreement, and if you need to, you can amend it, you can add things or subtract things, whatever works for you and the landlord. Now once you've sent over the contract and you've made some amendments and the landlord's happy and you're happy, then you need to close the deal. So you send the amended contract, you agree a start date, the landlord signs the contract, you sign the contract, you set up a direct debit to pay the guaranteed rent, you then arrange a date to collect the keys, ideally 2 weeks before the contract starts, and then you need 2 weeks of full focus. You should only be focusing on furnishing the house and marketing it aggressively, and that's the sales process. Now the typical numbers that we see with our clients are 100 messages normally gets you 20 viewings, and from those 20 viewings you need to make 4 offers, and from 4 offers you get 1 deal. Some people succeed faster, but this is the average. Now here's the important part. If one full lap cycle produces 1 profitable property, then scaling isn't about magic, it's about volume. If your goal is £10,000 a month in profit, you don't need a new strategy, you need to run more laps. Now on average, my rent to rent deals make around £900 per month in profit. Some of my students make £800 a month. Some of my students are making more than £1,000 per month. I also have some units that make over £2,000 a month in profit. So to get to £10,000 a month, you need to run through the lap cycle 10 or 11 times at the same conversion rate. That's it. That's how operators like my clients Wes, Sam and Milad built a 6-figure business. That's how I built a 6-figure business. Not by hoping, not by guessing, but by increasing throughput. There are millions of landlords in the UK crying out for a solution just like this. The person who runs the most laps wins. So it's very simple. To get your first deal, 100 units of outreach, 20 viewings, 4 offers will close 1 deal. So if you want 10 deals, then you have to 10x the throughput. Now I've given you everything you need to start your rent to rent business now. So there's no excuses. This is the exact framework that I use, that my students use to get rent to rent deals. And you have it all here in front of you. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and go and build your rent to rent business. Now I hope you've enjoyed this YouTube video. If you want me to help you start or scale your rent to rent business now, then I'll put a link in the video description below. Click the link and book in a free call with myself. On that call, we'll have a chat and see if we'd be a good fit to work together. If not, that's fine too. I hope you've enjoyed this video guys, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.